same, not totally the same. Much the same deck I shared in the ATD ICE conference, right? But in a format that allows us to have conversations and chat back and forth. And that was a big production, big stage production, and there's a lot of hand waving. This one I want to have, Don's laughing, he's right. There was a lot of hand waving, but I'd like to have a conversation. That's what I like about these more intimate sized groups. So I want to thank you for joining me today. While we're talking about events, and I know some of you, and it's always awesome with the Tech SIGs, because there's usually somebody who's really good at going, if I mention, like something comes to mind and I mention it, they're like, oh, they alt tab, they're over, they find it on Google, they drop the link in the chat. Thank you in advance to whoever is going to do that today, or whoever that is your thing, because I love that. It's kind of like XML markup for everything I say, and I absolutely appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about just Agile in general, and I had a lovely conversation just now with Julie and Cindy and Wendy about what they want to get out of today. So my hope and my suspicion, honestly, is that what they want to get out of today is very similar to what everybody else does, and if not, go ahead and put what you want to get out of today in the chat. That would be helpful. But a couple of other things while we're in the zone of talking about events that are coming up that this group might be interested in, is Core 4, which is in Nashville in November. I'm not sure if I'll be there. I may be there. If I'm there, I'm probably talking about this, but perhaps a different version of this. I will be, if you'll be at DevLearn, I will be at DevLearn later on this month, because thank you, Jennifer, today is October. So thanks for that reminder. We also have a 2-day workshop next week on Agile methods. So today we're going to talk very, very high level, almost mindset shift level around Agile. And next week, if you want to join us for a workshop, there's a link there. Oh, it doesn't need a capital L in the middle of it. Anyways, we have workshops, we have custom workshops for your team. But also we have an asynchronous course. So there's lots and lots of ways for you to get into doing more. And I know in our breakout session, we were talking about how it's great to be excited about Agile. It's great to read books about Agile, but how do you actually get started? And what are the techniques and stuff? So those are our opportunities to do that. And then Don mentioned XAPI. So we are right now in the fifth week of a 12-week XAPI learning cohort. And XAPI cohort is a free 12-week experience that, let me put it this way, if you're here in the Tech SIG, it's probably a good opportunity, but it's absolutely free. You can join late. Like we joke, it's never too late to join cohort. But it's a weekly webinar and a team. Thanks, Brian, for that shout out. And a team project that you can get involved in or not. And then we end up on, I checked the dates because it's not going to conflict with your Tech SIG in December. December 10th, we have what we call XAPI Party, which is a free full-day conference. So I've got lots of good opportunities for learning. But let's jump into what we're all about here. So do me a favor in the chat. Just let us all know, why did you show up today? Was it the networking? Is it you're always here for Tech SIG? Or is there something specific about this topic that you are interested in? And let's start talking about, let me just get all my screens and pieces happily together. Don, Zoom's not doing anything bizarre on us, is it?
No, it's looking fine for me.
Awesome. I was telling Don earlier this morning, gotta love technology, right? That I was doing a webinar yesterday and Zoom was not doing what Zoom normally does. And it was not a happy place. So awesome. So Don already did my bio. We don't have to spend time there. But you know, if you think about the work that we do, all of our work is project-based. And I don't, you know, whether you're doing an e-learning course, or instructor-led course, a virtual course, right? A lot of our work is project-based, and project-based work tends to make you feel like this. In fact, right? Why does project work, like, why does this happen? Why is all this stuff so hard? Go ahead and type that in the chat. Or this is a nice small group. Come off mute and just kind of shout out, like, why is our work so hard some days? Okay, networking, agile, learning, yeah, all the things. Multiple courses at a time. Yeah, Linda, you know what? That's a really insightful thing. Most of our colleagues in software who use Agile get to work on one project at a time. Yep.
Constant change.
Constant change. Okay, so Lisa, I'm gonna, yes, right? Constant change. I actually, though, think that's a good thing. Yes, it makes it hard,
Right.
but I think it's a good thing, right? Important projects attract attention, are doing something people care about, and things that people care about should change because we're learning more as we go. And so if you're on a project that doesn't change, I get a little bit worried about maybe it's not as important a project as you might want. Now, I will also say sometimes it's really nice to mix up the everything's strategic and important, it's got to be done now, with something that really is just a little bit quieter. So on our teams, we have a little bit of a blend. Like, you can't have all of the hair on fire projects. That's just not sustainable. Multiple courses and multiple stakeholders. People think my job is easy and that they know how to do it. I'm not sure that Agile fixes that part, but some of the transparency that we have with Agile does help that, right? Tammy, mutilated Agile for L&D. So yeah, back to the basics and remind what the basics are. Lots and lots of personalities. Okay, yeah, like I think we're all in the right spot today. I think we're all in the right spot today, right? Because we'd much rather have a project environment that feels like this, right? And I'm not saying, well, I'm not saying I'm a good dancer because I'm not, but right, if you think about what's happening here, right? Multiple people, multiple skill sets and roles, right? Moving to a similar beat, having a great time, hopefully managing not to bump into each other, right? Isn't it amazing how rarely we actually bump into each other when we're dancing? I mean, sometimes, right? And that's normal, right? But you're shifting and flowing and handing the spotlight off, right? There's a lot of synergies and connections here to our work, just as much as there is with this, right? So realistically, right, we're striving for a balance somewhere in between, right? And yet that's tricky. Actually, oh, you know what, Don, I forgot to ask, can we turn on, everybody go ahead and see if the annotation tools are turned on for this. And you can find your annotation tools in Zoom by wherever you see the bright green bar that says you are viewing Megan Torrance's screen. Go ahead and bump your mouse up in that general vicinity. This is a little bit trickier if you're on a phone. Click the annotate tool, and then you get stamps and drawing tools. But what I'd like you to do is I'm going to put a heart there, right? Put a stamp or a scribble or a something on the things that have happened to you. All of these happened in a single week on some or multiple Torrance Learning teams. It's working, yes, awesome. Awesome, yeah, okay. I love this, I love this. Okay, here's what this tells me, right? We all face very, very similar challenges in our work, right? And every single one of these is absolutely disruptive to you just trying to get your job done on time, right? And yet absolutely every single one of these was something that you needed to know in the moment that it happened. And you actually, well, maybe you weren't happy to hear this, right? You actually needed to know this, right? And it was good to get it when you did. So all of this happens. And this is why sometimes we feel like we're pulling our hair out, right? This is hard stuff. So here's the next thing though. While yes, we face a lot of change, the organizations we work with are also constantly changing, right? The changes that ripple down to us are not willy-nilly, right? Your organizations are also adjusting. In some cases, you're not as close to these changes as you want to be so that you find out what changes in your life earlier, right? And so one of the things I like about some of the Agile methods that we do is we accelerate the incorporation of change into our work by actively seeking it out. It is far easier to change earlier than later, far less dramatic. Okay? So I'll give you like first little tip of the day is what we do is when we start up a meeting with a client, every single internal or external client, right? The first item of the agenda is what has changed since we last talked to you? I am asking, tell me what's changing. Please let me know, because they're off doing their thing, right? It's if you've got kids, right? You know how your kids grow up and you don't notice day to day that they're getting taller and more capable, right? It's not until somebody comes in and they haven't seen those kids in a month or a year, they're like, oh my gosh, look how much you've grown. Of course you know they're growing, right? So the same thing is happening with our business sponsors, right? Their projects are changing and it's like little tiny things all the time. And you just happen to not be there in the moment that that change happens. And then you show up and it's like, oh, holy cow, that's a lot of change, right? And so we ask for that because they often forget, right? So that we often forget. The trick is that our, right, or so, sorry, not the trick, the why do organizations use Agile, right? So CIO magazine article, right, listed this. Actually, this is a couple of articles, but we started here with this Agile Project Management and Beginner's Guide, right? Keep in mind, CIO magazine is targeted at a software IT environment, but they've got some really good stuff if you're looking to kind of expand your tech wings. This is a pretty darn good list. Why wouldn't you use Agile methods in software development if you could get all of these things, right? And for those of you, and I know there's several of you who work within or alongside Agile teams, right? Go ask them why they do Agile. And what are the benefits of Agile? And actually, Agile's been around for 22 years-ish, 20 years. And it's entirely likely you've got people on teams who don't remember moving to Agile or don't know why we would do it this way. But it'd be a good conversation, right? Here's the thing. Our process that we're taught and held to in instructional design spaces, learning and development, right? Looks like this. And this is a process, right? That does it. Once you get into this middle section here, change becomes super disruptive, right? The design of this was designed to mitigate the risk of change because we're doing all of this thinking stuff up front. If we've thought everything through, there's less change going on later on, right? And yet we know that change like happens like here or here, right? And this whole evaluation bit at the end, yes, yep, I absolutely know it goes like this. I know that, right? In a perfect world, we are evaluating, right? And it does it. But here's the thing. I've already implemented something before I know it's going to work. If I'm strictly following this model, which most people don't, I get it, right? But this to me actually feels more risky. Right? This is what we call a waterfall shaped model, right? Because every step goes down like a Gantt chart, right? And unless you are a salmon, you are not going back up this this model, right? And yet in this model, when somebody says, let's go back to the drawing board, that is actually not a meeting you want to be in. Because we were not supposed to go back to the drawing board. We were supposed to follow this pathway all the way down to delivery, right? Let's go back to a drawing board. It's not a happy day for you, right? Those of you who are using Agile, especially leaders, there's a caution, because I know I get super excited when we find out information that does change everything. And so I also have to temper my enthusiasm a little bit, because I'm like, oh, we just found out that amazing thing, right? And some of those things on the list that we decorated up with all the stars and the arrows and stuff early on, some of those things I was like, yes, now we find out what they really want, which is actually a really difficult message for your team who's been working really, really hard to deliver what we thought they wanted. That actually, and it is so just kind of temper your excitement there, right? But here's the thing. The first day that we start working on a project, right, the day in which everybody wants a project plan is actually the day in which we know the least about what we are about to do. We don't know anything about the project then, right? And I think the only thing that we know is that it will change. And yet sometimes that's a hard thing to have a conversation about, right? And right, some people think, and I know in my breakout room we were talking about, right, that some software teams struggle with Agile. Absolutely. It is not the end all cure all. But one thing that's important is that Agile is not just being flexible and just changing all the time on the fly and running after every single squirrel that happens to cross your path. Agile is, right, when we're doing it right, what we're able to do is find those times when we need to accept in change, right? With all the squirrels running in front of us, which squirrels are we going to pick up and evaluate and decide, yeah, this is the one. I'm going to try to stuff this squirrel in my bag and make it to the finish line, right? Or no, I cannot possibly follow this really interesting squirrel, and I'm just going to let that run away for another day. Actually, the example I use here, right, it's like, oh, bye-bye, little chatbots. We'll catch up with you another day, right? Because everyone's like, oh, chatbots for learning, they're super exciting, and they super are. Actually had a project. It'd be, right, they needed post-learning reinforcement and personalization and reflection after a formal training event, right? Like, it's a perfect use case for chatbots. And the client was just like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, but this is a great idea. Let's do this, right? What we did was we released it, right? A formal learning event. And then the facilitator then sent out regular emails to everybody who'd been there, right? 30 days of regular emails and reinforcement and connection with people. And then after that, that's a lot of work. How about chatbots? So now we're doing chatbots, right? But we've also learned a bunch on that first project. So it's a great, great example of how we're going to do this, right? So we're still going to follow many of the familiar looking steps that we have learned with the ADDIE model, but we're going to mix it up a little bit, right? Earlier in our timeline, we're going to do an implementation and an evaluation. Okay. And ideally, that is going to spark a new round of design and development. Right? So I'm going to pause here. Say I'm building an e-learning course. It's not the only way to do this, right? We do this in video learning. We do this with instructor-led training. We do this with software, all sorts of stuff, right? But we do this with our chatbots. So I am, right, we're doing some analysis, design, and development, and we get out something that's testable. Now, a lot of times, when we're on a project, right, L&D people in general, actually do me a favor, in the chat, tell me, who reviews drafts of your work? It's not ready for prime time, just type in the chat. What are the names of the roles of the people who review your work when it's not ready to release? Awesome, awesome. Okay. All right, I love this, right? So we're seeing lots and lots of similarity, right? Our work, right? Wendy, there you go, some recipients. Okay, so here's what we've got, right? Your subject matter expert, you absolutely want them to review that. They are going to give you a review for accuracy, completeness, the whole 9 yards. Your project sponsor, business champion, whoever, right? Your key stakeholder, right? They are going to review because they want to see that you're making progress, and they're going to make sure that you're on direction, right? Your fellow instructional designers or students and interns and all those, Linda, we're going to come back to your lawyers. All those people, right, are going to give you a sense for, right, training managers, absolutely, right? They're going to give you a sense for instructional soundness. Can an utter novice to this topic learn something here, right? Your lawyers are going to make sure that it's, right, it stays on the rails, okay? In fact, if you're doing lawyers, you're getting an extra, my lawyers get an extra round here, right? Actually, I love lawyers because they keep me out of trouble. I'm just gonna, I like my lawyers. But here's the thing, nobody that we've just mentioned actually has to take this course and use it to be better on the job. Right? It's the end learners who are actually going to take this course and need to use it to improve their job. And they are the ones who can evaluate whether or not this is effective training or could help us evaluate. So all the above, absolutely. But we're missing a big part of the picture if we're not finding out if it's actually going to work on the job. Right? And so we're going to continue iterating until we run out of time, until we run out of resources, or until we run out of things that are worth changing. Right? And so this is an iterative process. And when you can make transparent what it takes for you to create an iteration, then you start creating some natural limiters in the environment around perpetual iterations. Right? So I think that sometimes people are concerned that they will be forever iterating, and they're only forever iterating if people feel like, if there isn't something more important to do. Because you know what? And so I charge my work. So anybody else who's a vendor, right, or a contractor, right, you charge for your work. There's a point at which we stop changing ands to ampersands and then changing them back to ands because it costs money. It costs money, it costs time, and there's a point at which we're like, yeah, it's actually not that important. But when it is essentially important, if the company's logo is an ampersand and we've spelled out the word and everywhere, it is actually very important that we make that change. Right? So those kinds of things are key here. So Agile, right? It's this iterative and incremental way of getting design and build projects, right? So things that have a start and a finish, not a teaching session, right? I'm going to flex based on what we do in the chat and how timing goes and whatnot. That's lowercase Agile. That's being flexible. It's being a great facilitator. It's not Agile methods, right? Capital A here. Highly flexible and interactive. We've been talking about that since we're blue. Maximizing customer value. All right, in the chat, tell me, who are the customers of what you build? Oh, I like that, Wendy, right? Direction, not perfection. Yep, absolutely. Customers, you got it, Anna, right? One very important customer, and there's multiple customers, right? One very important customer are the learners, right? Whoever is going to take our training. Who are some of the other customers of the work that we do? End users and leaders. Yep. And our business sponsor, whoever it was, right? Those leaders, whoever was who called us up and said, hi, we need a course. Actually, ideally, they will call us up and say, hi, we have a performance problem. Can you help? So that's that dual customer. And then the other thing here is one of my favorite parts about Agile is this high team engagement. Right? Is a very, I call it a full contact project management method. There's lots and lots of communication amongst the team as we hand off and with our business sponsors, so that there's a lot of communication and a lot of transparency. Agile for instructional design, right? The definition is the same. Some of the methods are changed, right? I call this LLAMA, stands for like Agile Management Approach. And it's because our work in L&D is similar from our software brethren, but somewhat different. So we're going to tweak how we do this, right? So software folks are really, really keen on features and functions, which, you know what, especially when we're building e-learning or chatbots, we are, sorry, we're on a chatbot project right now and we're having a super fun time. We care about these pesky things called learning objectives, which are not exactly like features and functions, right? And if your unit of measure is feature and function, but your responsibility is around learning objectives, we've got a change in how we approach things, right? With software, generally your testing feedback loop is pretty fast. And in learning, it's not. We do a lot of waiting where software teams, right? One sprint, one work burst, right, moves right into the next one. Right? And so our workflow is different. It means that because we have lots of wait time, we are juggling multiple projects. Agile teams building software tend to be teams of 3 to 8 people working on the same software for months, if not years at a time. I know. How many in the chat? How many projects are you simultaneously working on right now? This is always awesome. How many projects are you simultaneously working on right now? 6. Yeah. Three to 5, 3 on the way, 1 big and a bunch of little. Yeah. And Julie, I know you've been on a big project for what, 4 years now? Right, so we're juggling lots of projects. And so we're going to estimate time and effort somewhat differently, which is an entirely different discussion we can get into. But here's the other thing. In instructional design spaces, we are often designing and developing. Right? Our teams are doing both pieces. So there's a big, in Llama, there is a big design thinking component. There's a huge overlap there because of that. So somebody says, what's Agile? It's like asking Americans, like, what's America? What's democracy? And we say, it's the Constitution. Right, so this is the Constitution version, the Agile Manifesto, right? It was documented in 2001, right after a bunch of software folks had narrowly escaped the year 2000 bug or the year 2000 hiccup. I had software that survived that night. It was a little bit of a harrowing situation here, right? But the Agile Manifesto has 4 value statements. Right, that really guide all of the principles and techniques that are used, right? There's multiple different principles and ways to do it. You can do Scrum, you can do extreme programming, you can do Lean Bond. There's lots of different ways of implementing Agile. Scrum is not the only one, right? Scrum is the most popular, right? But they all share their values, as does Llama. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question you wanted to jump in with? Which I strongly recommend going at any time. Okay, if you've got a question, toss it in the chat or just pull yourself off mute and go ahead, right? So we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Quite honestly, in the L&D space, it's like, yeah, of course, that's what we're here for. We value working software over comprehensive documentation. This feels a little icky as a bunch of instructional designers who either need comprehensive documentation or sometimes what we're doing is making fancy comprehensive documentation, right? This is software developers. What if I did this? Through this work, we've come to value working learning experiences over comprehensive documentation. I would rather have a great piece of e-learning than a fantastic project charter. Project charter is helpful, Documentation is helpful, but, right, if what we're trying to do is maximize value to the customer, right, we're going to focus on that learning experience. We're going to value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Why? Because we value responding to change. There's a theme here, right? Over following a plan. When the situation changes, we are going to respond to it. It's like driving with your GPS, right? It says turn right, and you look to the right, and the road is closed because the bridge is out. You're not going to turn right. You're going to keep going. You're finding another way to get right. Okay? And we're going to do that same thing, right? How do we use these techniques and this, or how do we use these principles to go from screaming to dancing? Okay. There's two things, right? I want to talk about how do we use Agile methods to build relationships. So one of the things I didn't mention early on in my bio is I am a facilitator for eCornell in the Women's Executive Leadership Program. And we spent a lot of time talking about building relationships, strategic relationships to get stuff done. And I sit there thinking, wow, we need this in L&D. How do we build strategic relationships to get stuff done? And I'm going to show you how you can use Llama and Agile methods in L&D to do this, right? And then we're going to do that testing and developing and releasing iteratively to learn and incorporate change into what we're doing. So let's start with building those relationships, right? I'm going to talk about relationships with three people. One, your business sponsor, your organizational champion, right? Two, your subject matter experts. And three, your learners. Actually, we're going to do learners first, right? So your business sponsor. If you ever have had an opportunity to have a workshop or a session with Lou Russell, she is absolute pure gold. And if you haven't, by all means, the next time you get to a conference, scan the agenda, just search for Russell, right? Just search for Lou Russell and just go to her stuff. If she is up against me, go to her stuff, right? You've already had me, go see Lou. She's awesome. But she says this, right? If you don't know who the business sponsor is, stop working. Right? Two reasons. One, either it's because this project is not very important. There's nobody who's willing to be the sponsor. Or, right, somebody will start jumping up and down screaming because their work isn't getting done. You have just found your business sponsor. This is pretty awesome, right? How do we help business sponsors? We meet their business goals. Their business goals, well, they've got lots of them. Right? They've got lots, and when I say business, I also mean organizational, right? Institutional goals, right? They have lots of goals. Your job is to figure out which is the one we're working on with this topic. And by the way, their goal is not to build training. Their goal is to improve performance. Training might be the way in which we do that. You're then going to ask, right, what are the learner's goals? By the way, your learner's goal is not to complete training. Your learner's goal is to improve their performance, keep their boss happy, right? Move their career ahead, whatever, right? So when we are solving business problems and performance challenges, right? That's when we are building relationships with our business sponsors. Now, we're talking their language, not our language. Also, right? We are, as learning and performance professionals, we are uniquely suited to see whether or not and how big this overlap is. Right? And when this overlap is not big, it's our job to either bridge that gap or to say, hey, maybe training is not the solution here. Okay? Either of which helps us build better relationships with that business sponsor. So let's talk about building relationships with learners. Right? All too often, and actually how I was taught, right? So when we do an audience analysis, we want to capture the full range that is out there. And yet the older I get, the more I have learned that I cannot please all of the people all of the time. Right? So say you were to quit your job and right, Monday morning, you submit your resignation, you say, I'm going to follow my lifelong passion of becoming a wedding planner. And somewhere on your website, it's going to say, everybody goes home happy for my weddings. but you know you can't make everybody equally happy. So real quick in the chat, who do you make the most happy? Don't be cute about it, right? Who, just first thing that comes to mind. If you want to be successful, who do you make the most happy at a wedding?
The bride.
The bride. There you go, Jennifer, right? And some people say bride or her mom, mother of the bride, right? When I got married, it was my future mother-in-law. Some people say, right, whoever's paying for it. Yes, this is a very heteronormative conversation we're having right now. So we'll call that out. Here's the thing, right? It's not the bridesmaid, right? It's not this little guy here who will be screaming, and everybody likes to talk about, right? Think about your wedding story, right? Think about your wedding stories that you hear. It's usually about some little kid who does something really disastrous, right? Or great Aunt Matilda who complained about something and would not stop, right? So think about the number of times in which you are building training for this little kid or great Aunt Matilda, because that's who we keep talking about, right? What you want to do, right? And all these are personas, right? A learner persona. I actually have a couple of articles out there on learner personas, right? The learner personas are, thanks, Jennifer, take care. The learner personas help you identify people as people, right? With needs, right? Not a range of everything from this little guy to the maid of honor to this woman. Oh, and yeah, her too, right? I can't make a single experience that's going to make all of them equally happy, right? And within bride, I may have bridezilla. I may have first time bride. I may have fifth time bride. I may have, right? So there's lots of variations within there, and that helps me meet their needs as long as I have personas that are defined well enough to and granularly enough to identify what their needs and what their learning journey might be. Right. But here I am, right? I'm moving and grooving. I've got my business sponsor. I've got my learners. We're all happy. We've got the Venn diagram overlap between everybody's goals. And we know whose goals we're talking about, and how we're going to make them happy, right? And then we can't forget our subject matter expert. Right? There's lots of ways to build great relationships with subject matter experts. In fact, I'm a huge fan of doing whatever it takes to have a really great relationship with your subject matter expert, because they are they're going to help make or break your project. Okay? They're critical people, and they're your partners in this. Okay? One of the things that I have found that's very, very successful in working with and building a relationship with your subject matter experts is having a clear definition of scope and roles. In software, scope is defined, right? It used to be in the olden days written on 3x5 cards. Got some 3x5 cards right here, right? 3x5 cards. Right? Each unit of scope got a different card. So if you've ever seen Agile software for software developers, you will notice it tends to be lists of cards, like little white rectangles, right? Think 3x5 cards. Each one of those is a distinct unit. And you can pile them up and say, we are doing this pile and not this pile. Or we're doing this pile first and this pile second and then this pile third. Right? And that's very, very, for me, right? It's very, very comforting because I know what our scope is and what we're after. Our team uses Kathy Moore's action mapping process to get to that same level of granularity in scope. What we're doing, what we're not doing. So Kathy Moore, so after you buy Lou Russell's book, that is an ATD Press book, so you get a discount when you, if you are a national chapter member. Kathy Moore's book is not an ATD Press book. It's still worth every single penny. My favorite line, whoo, not that. My favorite line is right here, right? She's focusing on what people need to do. Now, keep in mind, your subject matter experts often show up with a wheelbarrow full of content. They know a lot of stuff, right? Your job is to tease out what we need people to do, and then what do they need to know to be able to do it, right? Or what do they need to be able to do it. A Kathy Moore project, okay, all my design thinking geeks, right? A Kathy Moore project is going to start out with, in the middle, hey, look, that's the goal. That's our business sponsor's goal right there, right? And then we're going to say, what do they need to do on the job? Okay. Then we work out to how do we practice that in training? And only then, what do they need? What content do we need? Right? Rather than, here's a bucket of content. How do we make that engaging and relevant? Right? Which I've done tons of projects like that. A content-driven course scope is hard to manage. A content-driven course, right, doesn't necessarily get the best out of your subject matter expert. So this is something that we do not only to do great instructional design, but also to build a solid relationship with that subject matter expert and to manage what it is that we're doing together. So what we end up doing in an action mapped course with Kathy Moore, and there's other methods to this, but I love the simplicity of this, right? We are defining some very granular scope in terms of what is the learner supposed to be doing at the end of this? And what are we doing to help them? And we could go on there and on there and on there forever. However, I want to talk about, right, as we think about building our relationships, right, these overlapping and mutually reinforcing relationships between your business sponsor, your learners, and your subject matter experts are absolutely essential, not only for the course that you're building, but for your L&D department's success in the organization and your career growth as well. These are really, really powerful relationships that go beyond just getting your work done on a daily basis. But now let's talk about developing and testing iteratively. Okay. Go ahead in the chat and let me know, like, are you doing, like, yes, do lots of iterations? No, I'm doing some internal drafts and then releasing stuff. Tell me about the culture of your organization and how it is that that you do or don't do iterations. And actually, if there's somebody who'd love to come off of mute and just share, like if you're doing a lot of iterative work and that's well supported in your organization, I'd love to hear that story. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about, like, what would I want to share? Build them, let it see it, rebuild and test and rebuild. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Don, you have just made my day. Thank you. Don, I'll put you on the spot. Got a story that where an iteration helped you see what you needed to be doing differently?
Yeah, I can share one from a few years ago. I was working with our ethics folks in the Department of Interior, and we were trying to create some training and, you know, ethics, legal, we got to include everything, and they did a content dump on me. And I went back to them, just exactly what you said. It's like, okay, what do we want people to do differently than they're currently doing? And it made them rethink it a lot. And it's like, yeah, we want them to have all this info, but maybe that doesn't need to be part of the training. And so we kind of, again, took the Kathy Moore approach, built backwards almost, you know, is how it felt to them. And I used to, like, build the whole design plan. Subject matter experts do not understand things that are written out on paper. So I had a team member that it's like, Don, just build it. Build it, let them see it, let them know what clicking that button is going to do. And inevitably, there were things they didn't like. There were things that they liked. I just had to get out of my head that, you know what, reworking something is better than building it. and building the whole thing and getting to the end and having to scrap it or rebuild again. So, you know, we came up with a pretty cool little program, you know, and instead of doing a series of webinars, we did more of a blended approach. You know, it worked well, you know, but it's like, you can't be afraid to just try it and let them try it.
Absolutely. And even you mentioned webinars, right? I love using a virtual classroom to test out content before I build e-learning, right? I get to actually test it with actual learners before I go and do the full build out on an e-learning course. So thank you, Don. I appreciate that. And I'd love to see where you took that where you took some of those concepts, right? So here's what we're looking at this iterative approach. And the goal here, and this is the guy I told you that I had taken my early Agile courses with, right? The goal in an ideal world, doesn't always happen, right? But is to skip some of those big mistakes, right? If you have read Michael Allen's Leaving Addie for Sam, same concept, right? This is a book about iterative development. Agile is how you manage an iterative development project. Right. Each time we release something, right, it's that minimum viable product. It is the simplest thing that could possibly work to get something out in the space, right? So I can do a webinar. This concept works. This concept doesn't. Nobody understood what that set of directions was, right? Do that, then build an e-learning course. Or build a super simple e-learning course. So we were talking beforehand, right? Build a course in Rise, release it, test it, change it, then move it into a harder format, right? Later on, there's lots and lots of ways to do this, right? But you're doing this to catch errors early. You always have something usable. I actually like to say that my storyboard could be used in a pinch. Nobody wants to. But in a pinch, if somebody walks in that door and says, I need to know this, this is my job, hi, here I am, I could use my storyboard to teach somebody, which means I can get feedback on whether or not that course is going to work. Okay? I have taught from course outlines, I have taught from storyboards, I have built instructor-led training before e-learning, all as a way of either getting the job done now or testing before I got something fully out and baked. It feels real good to ship something. I'll just tell you that, right? We have a gong here in our office. I know nobody's in our office anymore, but we have a gong and we would like bang that gong whenever we ship something. And that felt really good, right? We test and we know it's going to work before we release. And here's the other thing, right? We deliver earlier. How many times does somebody say, hey, we want a course and how long is it going to take? And you say, it's going to take 12 weeks to build that course for you. And they say, great, I'd like it in 3. You know what? The person who wants that course in 3, they get it in their first day. They get your first iteration. Absolutely. You can have that course in 3 weeks. It is going to be a rough draft and we're going to use your team to test it. Thank you so much. And then we're going to refine it and we'll give you the next version of it, right? And particularly in the pandemic, this was huge. Our team built and released a course on COVID-19 on March 11th, 2020, right? Weeks before things started shutting down, right? Was it our best work? Heck no. Rachel from Positions has already left. Good thing she left, right? Was it our best? She knew it wasn't our best work, right? Was it factual? Absolutely. Did our office manager hop in front of the camera and film some of those videos? You better believe it, because we couldn't get an actor in, right? So, and then did we have to change it? You got it. As things changed, we absolutely had to change that as we go. Was the first version in multiple languages? No. But you know what? We got something out fast, out in the space, tested it, and then continued to tweak and improve it. Okay. We're doing this all the time, right? The how isn't the hard part. We do this all the time. You all told me who reviews your stuff. You're doing this all the time. The difference is getting it out to actual learners, right? getting it out to actual learners, that's this someone else, and whether it is anecdotal or hard numerical quantitative data, right? Then you use that to inform the next iteration. I have actually, I'm going to share this example. This is it looks like we're holding this child harshly. We're just holding her mouth open so that the healthcare provider does not have to touch her as she's dropping in vitamin A supplements. This was a course in which we needed to get out. It needed to be effective. It needed to be in the language. It needed to be ultimately in 7 different languages. We released first in English and Indonesian because the English and the Indonesian business sponsors wanted it first. As other business sponsors wanted it, right? This is the example of getting something out fast, right? To the people who want it the most. When people had the resources, the time, or the desire to get their course, right? We did India like 4 years later, because you know what? Most of the people in India were just fine using the English version of the course. Once they got most of those people, then they needed to move in other languages. And so that's a direction that they took because of this, right? So we're moving and choosing how we iterate in very strategic ways. We built 2 courses for these guys, right? 2 courses on mobile back in the early days of mobile, one that scrolled up and down, the other scrolled side to side, because we weren't sure which was going to work better. Very early days of mobile learning. We wired this up with XAPI so that we could test how did people, real people, not our developers, not our client, real people who work in restaurants, how they interact with this. And we had data that showed that it didn't matter. So that was really helpful though, right? So I want to address Tammy's question here. Tammy's question, our associates work on multiple projects at a time. Do we have teams that are assigned to projects? Oh, you know what? And this is a great time because I'm going to stop sharing here. Do I have my contact information? I do. There we go. Contact information. You can take a screenshot of that, or I can put my email in the chat. I would love to continue the conversation with you as you have questions on implementing or whatever, but let's do just questions. Okay, Tammy's question. It depends. Let me go back and forth. In an ideal world, Tammy, I would have, we call them pods. They're kind of like COVID pods, but we called them pods before COVID was around, right? But it's like a group of people, right, that may take on several projects together, right? And we even would, in times that we've most successfully podded up, they would also get access to their own set of outside voiceover artists. So if we have 2 pods moving on their own sets of projects, they're not competing for the same resources, even external resources. This pod concept makes staffing very, very easy, and it makes juggling amongst projects very, very easy, and moving back and forth for priorities. The tricky part is that if you end up with one pod that all of a sudden gets super busy and one pod that's not busy, you start stealing from the other pod, and then you're not getting the benefits that you'd hope for. So I wish we had those pods. So and then there's research also on team dynamics. I used to be a big fan of mixing people up all the time on their projects. There's actually research on team dynamics that says that teams get more effective when they are more stable over time. Have you used these projects to change or shift culture? Ooh, Andy, good question. What are the challenge of business owners know what they want to change, but can't articulate the change they want? I will say, Wendy, I am not it's been a probably a couple of decades since I myself was formally neck deep in leading change initiatives. So we're typically a part of a change initiative in the work that we do, often not doing the change itself. I will say we worked with a client last year. They did want to have a change initiative, and it was, as you said, right? Business owners, they know what they want to see, they don't know how to get there, right? So absolutely. How do I prioritize? Ooh, Linda, great question. And this will need to be the last question I take for today, but it is a great question. Within organizations, right, often there is a business sponsorship team that helps prioritize for us, right? And when we don't know what the priorities are, they can help us. They also help define priorities for everybody else, right? And that's very helpful. For my team, right, if you think each of my business sponsors works for a different company, they're not all going to get together and say, oh yeah, that's okay, my stuff's not that important. And so we do have criteria. We have a rubric actually by which we weight projects and assign a priority to them. So, and some of that actually is, we talk about that in our workshop. We talked about that in my book, which is Agile for Instructional Designers, which is an ATD press book, which means if you order it through ATD, I think you can even get a PDF version, but it's $5 off from ordering it on Amazon. But I'd also be happy just to share with you our sheet. If you send me an email, I can share with you our very simple criteria for that. So our criteria are, if you send me an email, I'll share criteria, and we can talk about what's relevant in your situation too. So thanks, everybody. This was fun.
Thank you, Megan. We so appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. Everybody, Megan's got to run. She's got another meeting. But just again, thank you so much. And I hope sometime in the very near future, our paths get to cross live and in person again. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Don. This has been lovely. Good to see you again.
You too. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you. And we will have the recording available next week.